Hello, my friends. It is Monday, November 24th, 2025, and there's no deal. There's no deal on the 28-point plan, the counter proposal from the Europeans, that's 24 points, or the new 19-point plan. And if it's hard to keep up, I understand. Let me try to give you an analogy that I hope will make some sense. So they're playing the same game, let's say soccer, football for you Europeans, but they have different motivations. The Ukrainians are trying to win the game by running up as many points as possible and win fairly and get a just resolution. The Russians are trying to get as many penalties as possible in order to extend the game length, in order to make the game longer. And the Americans, like let's say the referee is Trump, he's trying to just end the game. Okay, so we have very different motivations, but with that as an analogy, and I know that no analogy is perfect, but it'll help you understand how differing motivations lead to different things. Okay, Trump posted this on Truth Social. Is it really possible that big progress is being made in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine? Don't believe it until you see it, but something good just may be happening. God bless America. Okay, well, he thinks that this 28-point proposal thing got things talking again, and that's going to be good. It's not. The Russians are just going to run out the clock, and I'll show you in just a moment. Rubio was apparently sidelined, and Trump only found out about the plan, the 28-point plan, at the last minute, and then blessed it. So it wasn't the American proposal. It was a Russian proposal that Trump finds out afterwards and goes, yeah, let's run with that, and created all this havoc and headache. Okay, Trump's plan, or if you can call it that, it's really a Russian plan that the U.S. said, this is our U.S. plan that is, we talked to the Russians and the Ukrainians, and this is the new 28-point plan. This plan would demolish 6 pillars of the legal order that America built: territorial integrity, including the UN Charter and the Helsinki Act; sovereign alliance choice, including the OSCE Helsinki Final Act, Istanbul Declaration, anti-aggression, the Nuremberg Principles, war crimes accountability, the Geneva Convention, victims' rights, UN Basic Principles, UNGA, reparations, NATO treaty, North American treaty, Article 10, open door policy. The Russians get a say? How is that? There would be total of 71 violations included in that 28-point plan, and they were just kind of running with it. But that's not something you have to worry about anymore, even though when it started with the negotiations, the U.S. arrived at the negotiations with an ultimatum to the Ukrainians. If you don't support the plan, then you're on your own with the Europeans. We'll stop everything, both arms shipments and intelligence. We'll cut everything off. That's how it started. It started off really badly. And then they negotiated for a while and they made some progress. It's not nearly, it undercut a lot of those bad 28 points, not all of them, but they have something moving the right kind of direction, not entirely. Yermak, head of Zelensky's office, says we have very good progress. We're moving forward to the just and lasting peace. I don't think he believes that. I don't think Rubio believes that, but they're making these statements. But the 28-point plan, it's gone. Don't have to worry about it anymore. It's over with. 28-point Trump plan, again, calling it a Trump plan, it's really a Russian plan with Trump saying, yeah, this is a new U.S. plan. It's not what it is. That no longer exists. Several points have been removed. Others have been amended. Interfax reports. Okay, so 28-point is gone. Now, as far as the 28-point plan, American senators were flipping out. Here's Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, calling the 28-point plan for Russia-Ukraine truce a historically bad deal. He likened it to the Munich Agreement when the world just wanted quiet and ended up with a global war. Yeah, it's bad. Then you also have a Republican, Joe Wicker, head of the Armed Forces Committee, saying essentially the same thing. Any concessions to the dictator are encouragement to the predator. So there was pretty much unified voices from the Senate saying, well, not entirely, but here's Mitch McConnell saying that Putin has spent the entire year trying to play President Trump. Now, he got pushback from, well, J.D. Vance. This is a ridiculous attack on the president's team, which has always worked tirelessly to clean up the mess in Ukraine that Mitch, he's talking about here, Senator Mitch McConnell, that Mitch, always eager to write blank checks to Biden's foreign policy, left us. That's MAGA voice talking about, like, Ronald Reagan kind of conservative Mitch McConnell. Okay. And then you have Mike Lee talking about the EU plan. This is all MAGA. The EU plan is crazy, suicidal, escalatory in a way that could trigger World War III. It's time to get out of this mess. It's time to leave NATO. Like, that's where Mike Lee from Utah is. He's a Republican from Utah. So there's division still, but there was a lot of opposition to that plan as well. Now, how are Republican voters? Look at this. Timely polling from Vandenberg Coalition showed the opinion of Trump voters on the prospects of forcing Ukraine to give up territory to end the war. It's staggeringly unpopular. Only 16% support the idea. Look, American Republicans don't necessarily support Ukraine, but they really, really don't want to see Russia get an advantage. Here you see this 16%, somewhat supportive of Russia's position, strongly supportive of Russia's position, only 16%. On the others, now there's 40% neutral. That's like too high in my estimation, but look at the difference over here between strongly supportive of Ukraine as opposed to somewhat supportive or strongly supportive of Russia. There's no contest. So President Trump's at odds with his own party. Okay, Trump does not care about Ukrainian sovereignty or democracy, says Michael McFaul. I think there's something to this. Trump does not frame this war as one between good and evil, Democrats versus autocrats, or the colonized versus the imperialist. He just wants the war to end so that he can take credit. He's that referee just trying to shorten the clock somehow. Okay, 9 points have disappeared from that 28-point peace plan. So we're now dealing with a 19-point plan rather than a 28 plan. Put the 28 points away. We're on 19 now. Bloomberg offers an insider detail. The draft no longer includes provisions like number 14 concerning $100 billion in frozen Russian assets and 50% of the profits from which the U.S. was supposed to receive for Ukraine's reconstruction. I don't know why that was in there to begin with, but okay, it's gone, as well as some others. So according to Bloomberg, the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine was trimmed down for a faster ceasefire. Some key elements were temporarily excluded and will be addressed in future talks, including a one-to-one meeting between Zelensky and Trump on territorial issues. It's not happening anytime soon, and by not doing that, I think Zelensky's dodging a bullet. Okay, membership in NATO for Ukraine hasn't been ruled out and may appear later as a security guarantee. The latest draft also no longer includes the clause about the $100 billion in frozen Russian relief assets, and that's partly because European allies wanted to issue reconstruction loans to Ukraine backed by those frozen Russian assets. So, okay, we don't know exactly what the details are. They'll emerge. Another one of these is this G7, G8, turning the G8 thing, because Putin wants to get back into, eliminate sanctions and get back into the economic clubs around the world. German Chancellor Merz rejects the U.S. idea of returning Russia to the G8 as provided for in the U.S. peace plan. I hate calling this the U.S. peace plan, but the U.S. called it the U.S. peace plan, even though it was just adopted Russian talking points. At the present time, Merz says, I do not see any willingness among the 6 current G7 members who are not America to accept Russia back into this group. I think that's fair. I think that's where we are. Okay, now, first interview with a negotiator in the room in Geneva from the Financial Times. The U.S. and Ukraine drafted a new peace deal, but left most of the politically sensitive elements to be decided by the country's presidents. So all the hard things are still out there for Zelensky and Putin to try to work out. The U.S. is reportedly no longer pressuring Zelensky to sign the peace plan by Thursday, November 27th. Why? Because it's not going to happen. So they put a deadline out there, but they're withdrawing the deadline because it's just not going to happen. It's kind of like the Epstein files, where Trump was resisting the Epstein files, resisting the Epstein files release. And then as soon as the writing was on the wall that clearly it's going to be released, he says, I encourage you to release the files. So he can say, I told them to release the files. It's kind of like that. Deadlines may now be more flexible, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So the European nations got together and they were drafting a counterproposal. The counterproposal was pretty awesome. 24-point plan. It'll be like wildly rejected by the Russians. No doubt about that. Okay. In today's Russian papers, there's skepticism over the current round of diplomacy. One paper said, quote, the European-Ukrainian gang will correct Trump's plan so that it is unacceptable for Russia. Well, yeah, I mean, just like the 28-point plan was unacceptable for Ukraine. Marko Mikkelsen from Estonia, Estonian Parliament, Foreign Affairs Committee Chair, says Chairman of Foreign Affairs Committees of 20 European countries emphasized in their joint statement today that just and lasting peace cannot be achieved by yielding to the aggressor. Instead, it must be grounded in international law and respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. It's a good statement. Garry Kasparov replied to this, and I'm not trying to throw shade on it, but this is also a powerful statement. This is a good statement, but Europe has mastered the art of good statement. Turning them into action is still the problem. That's correct, but the statement is still right. Okay, Moscow considers the European proposed version of the U.S.-Russia peace plan unacceptable. So that's the 24-point plan. The European plan does not limit the size of the Ukrainian forces, does not prohibit Ukraine's NATO membership. Then you see this. Ushakov comes out and says many provisions of the American plan for Ukraine, which Moscow has reviewed, are acceptable. That's the original 28-point plan. This was the original Witkoff-Dmitriev plan, mostly Dmitriev, and funneled through Witkoff. Then the Kremlin says, Ushakov again, the Kremlin says a European peace plan is unconstructive, unsuitable for Russia. So that 24-point plan is going nowhere. And then key points from statement by Putin's aide Ushakov on the current peace plan. As I predicted, Gerashenko says, Russia's not interested in real sustainable peace. They're trying to they're trying to add time to the clock. They're playing for time and continuing the war. Okay, Russia has reviewed one of the U.S. peace plan drafts. The Kremlin is familiar with the European peace plan, but considers its provisions unconstructive, unsuitable for Russia. What does Russia want? Russia does not want peace. Its goals are rather lifting or postponement of sanctions against Russia's largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. So they're trying to get some kind of concessions to show good faith that we're moving towards some kind of peace to show, lift off these sanctions. Okay, that's what Russia really wants. Okay, with that, the only path forward, says Michael McFaul, is serious amendment to this draft document that removes the most egregious violations of Ukrainian sovereignty and calls upon Putin to make concessions too. The 28-point plan didn't do anything like that. I'm not sure that the 19-point plan is going to be any better. We have to see yet. Michael McFaul again says, someone very close to Putin once explained to me that Putin thinks that all Westerners can be bought. We have no values, only a price. Well, that's how he's operating. He's just going to keep pushing until he can find some kind of concession. This is why they keep talking about, hey, let's get this deal or get past this war, and then we can have all these great lucrative deals about cooperation and drilling and trade and all that. Okay, Phillips O'Brien, this is a really good point in his commentary. One of the things that's not getting enough attention is that Trump has normalized the idea of the United States supporting the transfer of territory and millions of people from a democracy to a dictatorship. Yeah, that just can't be. We just can't allow that. Now, is Trump is Zelensky going to meet with Trump in Washington? No, there's no meeting planned between Zelensky and Trump in Washington. I think, as I understand, Zelensky's advisors don't want Zelensky to be doing that. It could be kind of a trap like in February. The president of Finland and Italy's prime minister are headed to Washington. According to the papers, Stubb and Meloni have departed for the United States again. In August, they accompanied Zelensky to his meeting. But these are the right two to be sending because Trump just he listens to Stubb and he really likes Meloni. I don't know why, but he listens to these two I guess they're president and prime minister. He listens to both of them. And, whoever's the most powerful person in the world is whoever last talked to President Trump, right? So they're the right people to be sent. Who's supporting Ukraine? It's all of Europe. Europe's role in the peace process should reflect this, but they lack the leadership. And look at this. United States is in orange, 2022 and 2022 to 2025. The United States is orange. Europe is in blue. Look how much was spent on Ukraine each year. Look in 2025. It just fell through the floor. There's very, very little here in 2025. Okay. Speaker of Ukraine's parliament, Stefanchuk, stated clearly in Stockholm, the war will only end when Crimea is returned to Ukraine. They're not even just talking about those 4 new oblasts. At the Crimean Platform Summit, attended by nearly 70 delegations, partners reaffirmed their support for Ukraine's sovereignty and made clear Russia is the aggressor, must face legal accountability. Crimea is Ukraine. Peace will only come when it's back within our borders, Stefanchuk said. Now, this was Putin about, what, 10 years ago? Back in 2014, 11 years ago. Listen to this. Don't believe those who scare you with Russia and shout that other regions will follow Crimea. We don't want to divide Ukraine. We don't need that. And most importantly, we want peace and harmony to come to the land of Ukraine. Yeah. Okay, well, if you believed him then, you shouldn't believe him now, because he's kind of proven that that wasn't the case. Meanwhile, Witkoff is talking about how he thinks that Putin's awesome. He's not a bad guy. Listen to this.
I liked him. Yep. I thought he was straight up with me. Of course, by the way, I've said that. And you can imagine, by the way, I say that, I get pilloried. Oh my gosh, you're actually saying
a word called communication, which many people would say, I shouldn't have had, because Putin is a bad guy. I don't regard Putin as a bad guy.
I don't regard Putin as a bad guy. This is half the problem here. You should at least regard him as a bad guy, even if you have to deal with him. Don't lose your principles in the process, but his principles don't cost him that. Okay, Donald Trump was a couple last things and we'll be done. Donald Trump talking about his call with Xi. I just had a very good telephone call with President Xi of China. We discussed many topics, including Ukraine and Russia. President Xi invited me to Beijing. I invited him to the U.S. later this year. We communicate often, and we look forward to more communication. But he said this during the talks between Trump and Xi. The Chinese leader pointed to the need to, resolve the crisis at the root, which is a phrase that Russia has been using to justify its goals. So Xi is using Putin's language to talk about the war, and that can't be good. All right, last little bit. Don't forget the good people of Georgia now on their 361st day, almost one full year consecutively, of protest against the Russian-occupied government in Georgia. And I'll leave you with this just to lower your blood pressure a little bit. This is Maduro. Nothing unusual. Maduro dances to a remix of his own speech. He broke into a dance of a remix of his own speech at a rally where he urged people to connect with students in the U.S. and demand dialogue instead of war. So he's going to dance. Honestly, I don't think any dictators or any politicians anywhere should do any kind of dancing. I mean, it's just like, it's kind of like athletes. You want them to play on the field. You don't really want to hear their political positions or them trying to sound smart. Same thing. Politicians just shouldn't dance. All right, my friends, tell me what you thought about what you saw here. Did this help you understand things? Put that in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.